In the misty hills of Willowbrook, Ohio, where pickup trucks lined every street and family values echoed in the air like church bells on Sunday, Noah had learned the art of silence early. At 20, a nursing student juggling classes and night shifts, he lived with his stepfather Richard, his aging grandparents, and his 6-year-old half-brother Max, a boy who wore kindness like a second skin and never left the house without his dinosaur socks. Since their mother died of cancer 2 years earlier, Noah had slipped into the background of the family home, like a guest overstaying his welcome. He'd come out only once in his life, to his mother in a quiet room scented with antiseptic and lavender, weeks before she passed. Her fingers, frail but warm, had cupped his cheek as she whispered, "You don't have to change. Not for anyone." It was the only time Noah ever heard the words he needed. After her funeral, no one in the family mentioned it again. Not Richard, not his grandparents. It was as if her acceptance had been buried with her, and the boy she loved was now a taboo. They tiptoed around. One afternoon, Noah came home to find Max on the living room floor, proudly coloring a crayon drawing of their family. The stick figures were labeled in shaky letters: Grandpa Joe, Grandma Ruth, Daddy Rich, even Mr. Whiskers, the family cat. But one person was missing. "Hey, buddy," Noah asked gently. "Where's me?" Max looked up, puzzled, then pointed to the trash bin beside the couch. "Grandpa said I shouldn't draw you, because you're different." Noah's breath caught, his hands shook slightly, but he smiled, for Max's sake. "And what do you think?" Max blinked, innocent and unsure. "I think you're still my brother, but am I wrong for that?" That night, Noah cried into his pillow, muffling the sound so Max wouldn't hear. He didn't cry because his name was missing from a child's drawing. He cried because the world had already reached into Max's heart and started carving out shame with the steady hands of the people who were supposed to protect them both. It wasn't just about being gay. It was about being invisible. Every dinner where his chair went unacknowledged. Every photo on the hallway wall with him cropped out. Every time someone changed the subject when he entered the room. Noah had never been kicked out. He'd simply been erased, slowly, surgically, as if his presence was a stain they were trying to bleach from the memory of their household. But Max still hugged him at bedtime, still asked him to read stories, still saved the corner seat on the school bench just in case Noah gets off work early. And that was enough to keep Noah there. Not for love from the adults who refused to see him, but for the boy who still did. He thought maybe, just maybe, time would soften things. He was wrong. If you've ever felt like your truth made you disposable, stay. Noah's story is just beginning. Like, share, and subscribe to Heart Stories, where the unheard get their voices back. It started with a suggestion over breakfast. Richard, their towering, stone-faced stepfather, poured himself black coffee and cleared his throat like he was making an announcement at a town hall. "We should do a family camping trip, something to reconnect us. Honor your mother." Grandma Ruth blinked, then smiled as if remembering a happier time. "Oh, she loved the woods." Max nearly jumped out of his seat. "Can I bring my kite, the red one?" Noah froze with a fork halfway to his mouth. Richard didn't do sentiment. He did discipline, chores, control. The idea of him organizing something as tender as a family retreat sent alarm bells ringing in Noah's chest. But Max looked so excited, and Ruth was already pulling out old camping gear from the attic. Noah didn't want to ruin it, not for them. 3 days later, they packed into Richard's truck and drove 2 hours north into the winding forest roads that framed the outskirts of Willowbrook. The deeper they went, the more Noah's stomach coiled. There was no cell signal, no nearby trails, just trees and fog and silence. "Looks perfect," Richard said, stepping out at a clearing that felt like the edge of nowhere. They spent the first hour setting up tents. Max hummed a tune while sorting snacks, and Ruth laid out blankets with shaky hands and small talk. Then Richard called out, "Noah, give me a hand. I need help bringing firewood from the truck." Noah followed. The air was thick and cool, the smell of moss rising from the soil. They walked further than necessary to a ridge overlooking the lower part of the forest. No tents in sight, no voices, just wind and the crunch of leaves under their boots. When they reached the edge of a shallow ravine, Richard stopped and turned. "You've changed that boy," he said, voice low. "What?" "Max, you've made him soft, sensitive, like you." Noah stiffened. "He's 6, he's kind, that's not weakness." Richard stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "He's watching you, copying you. I won't let him turn out like that." Noah's fists clenched. "If you're so worried about Max turning out like me, maybe try being someone he's not afraid of." A shadow crossed Richard's face. The next moment came like a storm, a blow to the shoulder, something hard and fast. A branch, or maybe a metal rod, Noah couldn't tell. His knees buckled. He stumbled backward, his temple hitting a root with a sickening crack. Stars burst behind his eyelids. His world spun. From far away, he heard Richard's voice, calm, practiced. "Noah! Noah, where are you?" A pause, then louder, panicked for show. "He just walked off. I think he ran." The sound of retreating footsteps faded, swallowed by the rustling leaves. Noah tried to move, but his arm wouldn't cooperate. His side throbbed, his head pounded. He blinked against the fog, settling over his vision. All he could taste was blood and pine. He lay there for hours, time warped into flickers of trees and sky, dreams and pain. He thought of Max, of how he'd smile if he caught a butterfly, of how he'd wait at the campfire, wondering when Noah would be back with the marshmallows. A boy like that deserved better. Noah fought to stay conscious. He dragged himself toward a slope near the creek. Every inch a battlefield. He needed to live. Not for Richard, not even for himself, for Max. Noah didn't know how long he lay there, half submerged in leaves and fading light. His vision flickered like a dying flashlight, and every breath scraped through his ribs like broken glass. The sky turned from gold to gray, then to something darker. At some point, the birds stopped singing. The wind no longer felt like a breeze, just cold. He might have slipped away entirely if not for the crunch of boots on the trail. "Noah," a voice called, uncertain but unmistakably female. "Is that you, sweetheart?" He tried to lift his head, but it felt like lifting concrete. A pair of hands found his shoulder, gentle but firm. A flashlight beam fell across his face and the woman gasped. "Oh my Lord, it really is you." The world tilted again, but this time into warmth. When Noah opened his eyes next, he was in a bed, a real one. There was a wood-burning stove crackling nearby, the smell of tea in the air, and a quilt that didn't scratch but hugged. He turned his head slowly. A woman with silver-streaked hair and tired eyes sat beside him, holding a cloth and a small jar of salve. "Hi, baby," she said softly. "You probably don't remember me." He blinked. Her face sparked something familiar, like the smell of old perfume or cinnamon toast. "I'm Eleanor. I went to school with your mama. We stayed in touch all these years. Christmas cards, little notes. She wrote to me even when she got sick." Noah's throat closed. He remembered now, the name on the envelopes in his mother's drawer. "You knew her?" "I loved her," Eleanor said, brushing his hair back like he was 5 years old again. "And she loved you, fiercely." Tears broke before he could stop them. Not because he was in pain, though he was, but because for the first time since he'd come out to protect his brother, someone had said his name without fear, disgust, or denial. Just love. Eleanor wrapped him in silence that said more than words. She didn't ask what had happened. She didn't press about Richard or the gash on his temple or the bruises on his back. Instead, she brought soup. She gave him clean clothes. She let him sleep. For the first 3 days, they spoke little. Noah's shoulder was dislocated and 2 of his ribs were bruised. Eleanor had no internet, but she had warmth and books and a porch where they'd watch the trees sway when he felt strong enough to sit. Then one afternoon, while Noah rested on the couch, Eleanor brought him a small box. "I kept this," she said, "in case you ever needed it." Inside were letters, his mother's handwriting, dozens of them addressed to Eleanor detailing everything. Her fears about leaving Noah alone in a house that would never accept him. Her hope that one day he'd find someone who truly saw him. Her guilt for not doing more when she had the chance. In one letter dated just a month before her death, she wrote, "If anything happens to me and Noah needs someone, please tell him I never stopped seeing him, even when they refused to." Noah didn't cry that time. He held the letter against his chest and let the silence speak. I think she wanted you to find your way back through someone who remembered the real you, Eleanor said gently. Over the next week, as his body healed, Noah began to speak again, not just with words, but with conviction. He told Eleanor about Max, about the drawing, about the camping trip, about the silence that followed when the family he stayed for erased him anyway. And Eleanor, with the stillness of someone who's survived grief, only said, "You're not the first boy this town tried to throw away, but you can be the one who walks back in standing taller than ever." Noah looked at his bruises in the mirror. They were fading, but the fire behind his eyes was not. For the first time in his life, he didn't want to disappear. He wanted to be heard. And if no one else would say his name with pride, he would say it himself. The anniversary service for Noah's mother was set for a Sunday afternoon. The local church, white paint peeling gently under the late summer sun, was packed. The same people who'd brought casseroles during her chemo treatments now filled the pews with folded hands and solemn nods, murmuring about grief and what a woman she was. Noah hadn't been invited. There was no phone call, no email, no mention from anyone in the family. They didn't expect him to show up. Or maybe they did, and just prayed he wouldn't. But Eleanor knew. She stood in the hallway that morning holding a pressed shirt, lavender, the color his mother used to wear when she baked, and said, "Noah, today's not about what they want. It's about what your mother would have wanted, and she'd want you in that room." Noah dressed slowly, his arms still weak and wrapped beneath his sleeve. The bruises had faded to yellow and brown, but his voice, the one they tried to beat into silence, had never felt stronger. They drove together, Eleanor's truck rattling along the familiar roads. When they pulled into the parking lot, Noah saw the cars he expected. Richard's red pickup, his grandfather's ancient Buick, a scattering of church members who used to smile too tightly whenever he was around. He almost turned back, but Eleanor placed her hand over his. "They don't get to tell this story without you." Inside, Richard was already speaking. He stood behind the pulpit with practiced grace, telling stories of his late wife, how she smiled through pain, how she loved family above all else, how proud she'd be to see them still whole, still strong, still together. Noah stepped into the aisle, his boots louder than expected on the wood floor. Heads turned, whispers erupted. Richard's voice faltered for the first time. Noah walked straight down the middle, past a pew where his grandmother gripped her rosary tighter, past his grandfather's narrowed eyes, past Max, who sat confused in a little tie, looking smaller than Noah had ever seen him. He climbed the steps to the pulpit, his breath calm, his heart not. "This family," Noah said into the microphone, "isn't whole." The room froze. He turned to face them. Every one of them who had stayed silent, who had looked away, who had said, "We just don't talk about that." "My mother accepted me. She told me I was brave. She told me I was loved. And then she died. And you all," he looked directly at his father, "decided she took her acceptance with her." A murmur of discomfort rippled through the crowd. "I came out for Max," Noah continued, voice steady, "to protect him, because I saw where this was headed. The same fear, the same shame, the same lies that tore through our family once were coming for him." He paused, pulled out his phone, and played the recording. Richard's voice boomed through the sanctuary. "If he disappears, Max gets a chance at being raised normal, not infected." Gasps, a few sharp inhales. One woman in the front shook her head, clutching her chest. Max looked up at his father, then back at Noah. "I didn't come here to ruin this service," Noah said. "I came because I belong in this story, and so does the truth. My name is Noah. I am gay, and I am not ashamed. But the rest of you, Baskin, should be ashamed of what you did to me." Silence, deep and echoing. Richard opened his mouth. No words came. He looked like a man seeing a ghost. Maybe in that moment he realized he'd lost control. Maybe he saw the same stubborn strength that once lived in his wife, now standing in the sun he tried to erase. Noah turned to leave, then paused. "My mother taught me how to tie my shoes and how to write my name. But what she really taught me, what she left behind, was this: you never ever stay quiet about what matters." He stepped down from the pulpit, walking past every stunned face, his back straight, his voice finally used not to defend, but to claim. Behind him, Eleanor stood, arms crossed, proud. And behind her, Max rose from his seat and followed his brother out the door. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. The audio Noah played at the church spread fast. Someone had recorded the whole moment on their phone, and by evening it was shared across Willowbrook's local Facebook groups and even reached a state advocacy page. Most people were shocked. Some still clung to denial, but no one could ignore it anymore. That Monday morning, Noah, with Eleanor by his side, walked into the sheriff's office and filed a report. The bruises had mostly faded, but the doctor's photographs, the torn shirt, the police sketch of the hiking site, and the audio were enough to open an investigation. The detective in charge, a younger woman named Keller, had tears in her eyes when she read the statement. "You didn't deserve this," she whispered. Richard was arrested within the week. The charges were clear: aggravated assault, child endangerment, and failure to provide aid to an injured person. His mugshot appeared in the local news, next to a screenshot of Noah's words at the church. The headline read, "From silence to strength, the nursing student who brought truth to Willowbrook." But Noah didn't stop there. While the town argued over what they just witnessed, he quietly met with a lawyer, a friend of Eleanor's, and submitted a petition for temporary guardianship of Max. The moment he signed the papers, his hands trembled. Not from fear, but from the overwhelming weight of responsibility and hope. The hearings were tense. The grandparents tried to argue for custody, but their silence over Richard's abuse worked against them. Noah presented his academic record, his part-time job as a medical assistant, and his plan to move near the border of Ohio where Eleanor had a spare room waiting. But most of all, he presented his love for Max. "I don't want to erase his father," Noah told the judge. "I just want Max to grow up in a home where he doesn't have to be afraid of who he might become." Weeks passed, social workers visited, psychologists interviewed Max. Eleanor baked cookies for every meeting, while Noah practiced flashcards on the anatomy of the heart between legal briefs and bedtime stories. And then, on a cloudy Tuesday morning, the judge's ruling came in. Temporary guardianship was granted. Noah cried in the hallway of the courthouse, Max tucked under one arm, Eleanor hugging them both. The silence that once suffocated their home had been broken, not with rage, but with a steady voice and a vow to never let history repeat itself. They moved into a small yellow house near the state line. It had chipped paint, a creaky porch, and a wild oak tree in the yard that Max immediately named Goliath. Noah put his nursing degree on pause for one semester to settle in, picking up extra shifts at the local clinic. On the wall in the living room, Max taped two drawings. One showed Noah in a hospital bed, holding Max's hand, both of them smiling despite the bandages. The second showed their new family, Eleanor, Noah, Max, and Goliath the tree. No mention of the past, no erasure, just love, drawn in crayon. One evening, Max looked up from the couch and asked, "Do you think Mom knows?" Noah nodded slowly. "I think she knew even before we did." They sat in the quiet, the kind that didn't hurt anymore. And outside, the porch light stayed on, not waiting for anyone to come home, but welcoming who was already there. Have you ever had to fight to belong in the place you were born into? Or did you, like Noah, find home in the people who chose you back? Tell us below. Someone might need your story today. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to Heart Stories. We're here for those who've been cast out and chose love anyway.